fellow Americans.
You might be wondering, why in the world is there a 30-minute countdown before the show starts? Well, we actually start live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so this whole 30-minute countdown is a chance for YouTube and Rumble to send out their alerts and notifications, so we encourage you to gather up and hang out with everyone in the chat room. So every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is when we do this show live. You can join us for the countdown if you like, or just set your clock and reminder that at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we go live. You can also make sure you subscribe and turn on that bell notification, so hopefully you will get a notification.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
Who are shouting? Just a moment.
I'm not defending him in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planning information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually, the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives of or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect, it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
We become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the problem. We can't even agree. We can't even agree what disinformation is. You can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals.
So do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
You would know this this is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis shared that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
Hey everyone, just as a reminder, our show starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, just a few minutes from now, but I should remind you that we have a daily newsletter. It's totally free. Natalie and I work very hard on it every morning over a cup of coffee, putting the stories together that we think are important that the mainstream media is going to ignore. All you need to do is go to our website. It's just redacted.inc. Put in your email address. We won't ever sell your email to anybody. And then you'll receive a welcome email. And all you need to do is verify that email, and 7 a.m. Eastern Time is when we send out our daily newsletter. And it's about 5 or 10 minutes in length that you can read it over your cup of coffee. And like I said, we cover 4 or 5 of the big stories of the day, plus a couple of things you might have missed while you were sleeping. We try to have some fun with it, add a little humor into it. And again, it's a great way to start off your morning. But it's also a great way for us to stay connected with you as well, because we've been banned and blocked on some of these platforms before, where we haven't been allowed to post anything, not even a community post. So the only way for us to stay connected with you is through our newsletter. We were able to send out a newsletter and say, hey everyone, we're blocked for the next week, and let you know what was actually going on with our show. Anyway, go to redacted.inc and sign up for the free newsletter, and it'll be posted first thing in the morning over your cup of coffee.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed 1 million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean to the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we're still waiting for.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, I respectfully suggest they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone. Or to take the nation to war partway. Or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip. Because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector. You didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, They get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you gotta come in and talk to me a sec." He says, "We've made the decision, we're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, "I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Hey everyone, Clayton here. The show is going to start at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. I should remind you that we have a VIP community. It's our Redacted Rebel VIP community. Now, this show is totally free, what you're watching right now, right? You can subscribe here on YouTube and Rumble, totally free. But if you'd like to support independent journalism, we are run by you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do this show. We wouldn't be able to hire the team that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the servers that we have. We wouldn't be able to afford the reporters that we have, the team that we have. So you can support us by going to redacted.inc, and on the right side of your screen, you'll see a VIP community button. Just click that, and for the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support us. We put out exclusive content, early interviews that no one else will see, live streams just for our VIP Rebel community. So again, it's totally free to watch this show, but if you do want to support independent journalism, we would really appreciate it. Come on over to redacted.inc, click on that community button, and decide if you want to sign up or not. It's totally up to you. We thank you. And meanwhile, the show will start in just a few moments at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
Well, one of the 4 principal functions of the CIA is to gather intelligence and ideally forward it to the president, the users of information, the policymakers, as they say. There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars, the covert action that's written and talked about so much, like what's happening in Nicaragua today from Honduras. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. For example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Time, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he had gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Time. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims, and then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbunda women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort of totally false propaganda.
The only reason that I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome back to Redacted. Thank you for joining me, or maybe not back. If you took the holiday off, maybe you caught up on shows. We didn't take the holiday off. We were here. And I remind you that this is Redacted. Normally you have two hosts. This week you have one. I'm Natalie Morris. Clayton Morris is away this week and next. So you've just got me. But I appreciate you joining me because we have big news to talk about. The world could end tomorrow because we have major threat of nuclear war. We have had for a long time, and that rhetoric seems to be escalating. Is it true? Is it going to happen? If the world ends tomorrow, just don't wake me up. But this is some serious stuff. So we're going to talk about who's saying what are the consequences, and why now is as good a time as ever to talk about peace. We're also going to talk about the war on China, or at least warlike rhetoric on China after this new Foreign Relations Act, which suggests a multipolarity. The unipolarity in the room doesn't like that. We have a guest that's going to explain it to us, and I'm excited about that. Plus, a judge has ruled that what happened during the Twitter files cannot happen any longer. The government is no longer supposed to reach into social media and tell them what to do. You would think that we would be unanimously celebrating this, but the leftists on CNN are crying tears in their coffee because they think this is micromanaging or something. We're going to show you what this means, what it should mean for us, maybe what it will mean for us over at Redacted on certain platforms. We also remind you that an impeachment proceeding continues against President Joe Biden. This has been a story that has benefited from a lot of different distractions, but we don't want it to fall through the cracks because I think it has just as much merit as any impeachment trial that went forward for President Trump. And we believe in equal justice under the law. So we're going to take a look at that, however, briefly today in our last segment of the day. So thank you for staying with me. I'm excited to get started. Redacted starts right now. All right, let's do it. Today is Wednesday, and it is the 5th of July. Major news coming out. And again, I remind you, I'm Natalie Morris. I'm running solo this week and next. I will not be here tomorrow. Tomorrow, everyone on Redacted gets a break, which is quite nice. This has been a challenging week for me with Clayton away, and then also my youngest is home and not in a camp. She's only 6. So I've been doing a lot of research for Redacted and playing Barbies. I've been doing both things. It's a lot, but I'm glad to be here with you. She's asleep. I'm all yours.
I've been playing Barbies. I've been playing Barbies too, but my daughter's at her mom's, and she's 17 and doesn't have any. I've been playing with my own Barbies.
Cool. You can make a lot of money on YouTube playing Barbies and giving other moms. Like I sometimes watch that stuff and get ideas about, what are things kids want to play with. And then they just tell me I'm doing it wrong. But nevertheless, I've done the playing. And now I'm here. I'm here with you. I also have David in the control room and Philip in the control room. They are brothers, and they were having a little brotherly spat before the show, and that was fun for me. I'm no one to argue with Clayton gone.
That wasn't a spat. That wasn't a spat. That was a production disagreement.
One of them just kept yelling, no, it's wrong. It was great. But David, I appreciate you chiming in and showing us your face, and Philip not showing us your face, but chiming in whenever you feel like it. So thanks for being here with us. The chat room continues to posit that Clayton was abducted by aliens. I don't know that he hasn't been, but he does answer his texts. So wherever he is in outer space, he's well and wishes you well. So let's get to it because it is time to talk about whether or not we will be here on Friday collectively if we have nuclear war heading our way, because we are back to a major threat of nuclear war now, with Ukraine saying that Russia is about to blow up the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They have controlled this plant for over a year now. Why would they control a plant, blow up a plant in their own control? This is a question we've been asking for months. Why would they sabotage this nuclear power plant? Now, here is Zelensky saying on Twitter today that he started out by thanking everyone for the weapons that they've all been sending from the West. He also says he really, really wants Ukraine to be in NATO, and that for this to happen when they all meet next week, like, hey guys, don't forget about me. Really want in. It's important. And he's also saying that they have information from their intelligence that the Russian military has placed objects resembling explosives on the roof of several power units in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, perhaps to simulate an attack on the plant. Perhaps they have some other scenario, he says. But in either case, the world sees, can't but see. This was translated from Ukrainian. I don't understand that translation, but we'll give it to the translation software. The only source of danger to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is Russia and no one else. So the Kremlin responded by saying that this threat is actually from Kiev and not from Russia. Again, reminding us that they have been in control of this power plant for over a year. They have ratcheted the power down. I think they've turned off into safe mode. You don't just turn them off. That's not how it works. But turned down into safe mode 5 of the 6 reactors and kept them ready for the winter when they need to bring them back online. Again, it's worth reminding us that the Kremlin has been asking the International Atomic Agency, the IAEA, to investigate Zaporizhzhia since last summer because Ukraine has been shelling this plant for nearly a year now. When they did this, do you remember these images from September? These inspectors arrived in Kiev last September from the IAEA, and they were making their way to Zaporizhzhia power plant, and they were held up by the Ukrainian military for 3 hours, blocking their access. When they finally did get through, they kind of just did some filming of themselves looking around with clipboards nodding, and then they said, okay, yeah, we got it. Here is IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi.
We are finishing our long-awaited visit to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I have just completed a first tour of the key areas that we wanted to see in this first approach to the whole facility. Of course, there is a lot more to do. My team is staying on, and more importantly, and most importantly, we are establishing a continued presence from the IAEA here.
Now, after this, Grossi went on CNN and said, yes, people are hitting it. It's dangerous. There's been shelling. We don't know who's doing it. It's happening. We think it should stop, but we've got people there kind of waiting around to secure the plant. So if they don't know who's doing it, they won't blame on anybody, but they're going to leave people there to possibly be shelled. It was a very bizarre occurrence and no help at all. Watch him telling CNN, yeah, we're not sure.
So when you say people are hitting, can you make a determination as to who is hitting?
I cannot make that determination. We don't have the means to do that. As you know, you would need to be looking or monitoring the military operation in the region in all its vastness, which is not only beyond the mandate of the IAEA, but would require enormous capabilities. What we know, and that is my responsibility, is to look at the safety and the security of the facility, to determine what is really going on. And this is why my visit there, the inspection there, and the fact that now I have people who have stayed there, so the IAEA is staying at the plant, was essential, indispensable.
Okay, so he wants to determine what's really going on, but he cannot determine what's really going on, is what he said there, which was super helpful. Russia even showed them shells and said, we don't make these. These come from the West. Here's what's hitting the plant. We don't know. We don't see that. We don't know where it's coming from. This was back in September. Russia said at the time this was not a serious report. And now just today, the IAEA, because they just told us they left people there. They should know what's going on, right? They've had eyes and boots on the ground, IAEA boots on the ground since September of 2022. Well, here's their statement for today. They said, we've basically what it says is we've been looking around a lot. We know of this nuclear threat. We've walked around there and we've walked around there, and we know this thing about Building 5, and we know it's a thing, and we're walking around and looking. Again, so helpful. Now, no one in the West has pushed for more inspections then. No one in the West is pushing for more explanation now. They're not going to the IAEA and say, hey, we've got some major rhetoric around nuclear fallout, because if something happens, if Zaporizhzhia blows up and the West is able to blame it on Russia, they have justification for then firing their own nuclear arsenals. What Russia will return, it's all hell for all of us, literally. Again, this is not a scenario that benefits anyone, but Ukraine sort of needs it as a threat to step up, because the West's attention on Ukraine is what is being called here by Politico Western war fatigue. We're just, I guess we're kind of tired of it. We want something a bit more sexy. Like, can we have a new round of, I don't know, razor blades and Halloween candy? That's what Americans do. We need to be constantly stimulated. That's sort of what they think of us. Not only would a nuclear explosion kind of, reinvigorate the U.S. to stay involved, but it would also spread a cloud of radioactive material throughout all of Europe. So is this a false flag, or would they actually do it? This is the question du jour. It's a major question. None of us can actually answer it. None of us want to be asking this question. We shouldn't have to, for a couple of reasons. That I'm going to show you the map again, that this conflict can end with borders as they are right now, and no one need die any further. Right now, Alexei Danilov, today, Ukraine's Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, he said this today on Twitter. He says that Ukraine's task is no longer to retake land, but instead just accomplish the maximum destruction of manpower, equipment, fuel depots, military vehicles, command posts, artillery, and air defense forces of the Russian army. He says this has been fruitful recently. Now the war of destruction is equal to the war of kilometers. The reason he's saying this is because they have gained so few kilometers in this major countermeasure that we were waiting on. Here's a map today. Now that he's talking about kilometers, let's take a look. This is from the Financial Times, published this war about the status of the counteroffensive. Now the yellow, you probably can't even see that on your screen because it's so tiny. So I circled it here for you in blue. The yellow is what the Ukrainian claimed counteroffensive. It's not even 1% of the land. Now let's just go over what we're looking at. Again, it says Crimea is contested. Crimea doesn't feel that way. They voted to become Russia, 95% or more in some regions. But okay, Russia considers Crimea Russia. The red areas is the Donbass, which has been bombed and shelled since 2014, since the Maidan coup, because those places did not want to support the Maidan coup and actually supported Russian alliance. A lot of them are ethnic Russians, and they've been terrorized by Ukraine for nearly 10 years now. They asked Russia to intervene. Russia did just last year in March of 2022. Russia now holds that red line, that the sort of lighter black line that you see to the left of where the red ends, that is where the Donbass ends. This is where those are people who have voted to become Russia and are hoping that Russian troops continue forward. But that is also the area that Ukraine still considers theirs. Now, obviously, if in thousands of deaths, and we're going to say, how long would we say this counteroffensive has been going on? 3 or 4 weeks? They haven't even pushed back even a tiny bit. They're not going to push that red back. They're not going to.
And as Scott Ritter pointed out, they've not even broken one single line of defense yet. Like, they're not even to Russia's quote unquote wall of defense.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that territory they've got has been kind of like just, blowing stuff up and moving themselves forward, but it's not been man-to-man combat in those areas. And so, again, let's look at the map as the map that we just showed you was a Western map. It aligns with the map that's being shown inside Russian media. This is from RIA, the major media outlet. They show about the same thing. But what's missing from the Western map that we didn't just see are those blue dots that are above the contested region. What those blue dots there are Ukrainian forces. Why are they there, do you think? They're telling us it's a counteroffensive, meaning they'd be countering what has been taken over by Russia, which is the red contested parts. Why are they up there countering nothing, do you think? Any guesses? Could it be because they're afraid of attacking Russian lines? They don't feel equipped. They don't want to.
And maybe it's not defense. Maybe it's offense.
Clearly, that's not defense.
Yeah. Yeah,
yes.
Clearly.
Yeah. And what they're doing there is, well, today Russia said that 5 drones were downed inside of Moscow. So are they there in active combat? Are they there doing these sort of remote attacks? It's unclear. The way that Ukrainian forces moved into Crimea when Crimea voted to become a part of Russia was that they were not actually able to break into Russian defenses because the way that happened, the Maidan coup happened, people from Crimea had gone to support the Russian side, to support not becoming a Western alliance, a Western allied government, and the toppling of the former government. And they were attacked by pro-Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian military on the command of the new Western aligned government. And they were chased back to Crimea. What Crimea did was build fortress around their land, go to their parliament and said, we want to vote to annex ourselves from Ukraine. They had no idea that Russia was going to come in and help them. And they fortified their lines with shovels because they knew that Ukrainian military was coming in to attack them. And so because they were successful in fortifying their lands and they were rescued by Russian forces that were already stationed there, they did not get attacked like the rest of the Donbass. And so those forces kind of turned themselves on the Donbass, and the Donbass has been suffering ever since. But what happened was Ukraine had some soldiers already stationed in Crimea. They had some people already stationed in the sea there. They were trying to sabotage. They were able to get weapons into certain caves. They were trying to poison water wells. They were doing all of these things that they could do in small measure as resistance to what was supported Russian territory. I think that it sounds like that seems like why those blue dots, can we put that map back on? It would seem that's why those blue dots are outside of the forces, because most of the time they don't want to go head to head with the Russian army. And right, you can't blame them.
And that's everything that they've done would be against civilians, not soldiers. Yes. So, yeah. And also it's like, I was just thinking, this is kind of like, so I play pool on a pool league and you have level 7 pool players and you have level 2 pool players, and they're like way different. And it's like Russia has all these high level soldiers, and you've got people that are being dragged out of their homes that don't want to fight, that probably have no idea how to fight on the Ukrainian side. So you've got like these, well-trained soldiers against just common people. And so, of course, they're going to take the lesser, where their life is not more at risk, like poisoning water and sneaking in and doing these surprise attacks in the civilian areas rather than confronting these soldiers.
Yes. And, we're starting to get some Western media admitting that Ukrainian soldiers are afraid. They're untrained for this. They should not be thrown up against this line that Russia is going to hold now. Now, if you watch, if you read about the annexation of Crimea and how these people were terrified of the Ukrainian army and they knew that they had held the line, but the Donbass had not, part of the question becomes, why has the Donbass been suffering all of this time? Why did it take Russia so long to come and put a stop to this? But now that they're there, they're holding a line, and these civilians are saying, okay, good, we will no longer then be shelled by the Ukrainian military, which the West knew. Ukraine has been spending $8 million a day to attack the Donbass and was borrowing it from the International Monetary Fund. So it's not like this is a surprise to those of us in the West. We've known this. The question is, who feels motivated to run up against this line now that it seems to hold? Who wants to give their lives for this? And those people they're simply not trained for this. So I think that what we're seeing is that Ukraine knows they cannot take this land back. If we could just leave the map up, I just feel like it's important for us to just study this map and realize what's at stake here. The West is not going to move that red back. They're not. Any more than they're going to move that Crimea to that color, even though Crimea is Russia. They're not going to. And so now is as good a time as ever for peace talks. Those people voted to become Russia. Most of them are ethnic Russians. They want this to be left alone and let the soldiers who don't want to fight and don't have experience fighting just go home. Just let them stop dying. Because this is, otherwise, if it's just to get our attention with nuclear war, you have our attention. We want peace. And we want it right now. So let me know what you think of this in the chat. If you feel like nuclear war is something we will wake up to tomorrow, or if you think that this will somehow get ratcheted down. I posted about this on Twitter, and someone had said, oh no, the neocons would never let this happen because then it's over too fast. Like they like to drag it out for profit. And I was like, is that an optimistic way to think about it? Or is it pessimistic? At this point, what's preferable? Is a long drawn out war or just to nuke us all? I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think I would opt for losing money than lives. But you're losing the same. I just don't think the quantity would be as much if you turn it into a nuclear war versus a financial monetary war.
Yeah. So
because at this point, the U.S. is only going to risk Ukrainian lives. We're not going to send any of our guys over. But if it becomes nuclear, we're going to have to get involved. We would have to send people over there.
Well, I think that if it becomes nuclear, we're involved right away. And it would seem by this logic that the West is waiting for an excuse almost. And
it's like we've been pushing for that excuse. I mean,
that makes no sense because they're aimed right back at us.
And they have allies that we have to know. Like I think that it's ignorant of us to think that we could take on Russia and China and the allies that they have now. We're naive to think that we would even stand a chance, in my opinion.
Yeah. What is the mineral that Dr. John? What's Dr. John, the YouTuber, the COVID expert? He's been he's been talking about having iodine tablets in your house. I don't have any. Do you?
I do not.
So he's been saying, look, this seems like a real threat now. Maybe we should just have this. I mean, how much do you need? This is terrifying. So I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just chatting about things I've seen on YouTube. This is the unofficial part of the segment. So let's make that clear. All right. Shall we move on? Anything else to say about nuclear, boys? Any super chats you want to read that scare the crap out of you? I don't want to talk about it either. So let's move on and see if we can, I don't know. We're going to talk about this Chinese foreign relations law, why the West is saying they may have to respond to China's China's new foreign relations law with military might, as if we're not busy enough pushing down on Russian rhetoric. We got China there too, just so you don't forget. We also are going to talk about how the Biden administration and the federal government can no longer censor what we say on social media. They probably still will, or at least they'll still try. But we get a major ruling in favor of free speech. I think it's great. And we're going to talk about that. Plus, we're just going to revisit, kind of go over the whole impeachment thing because it's still going on. I feel like the mainstream media is really trying hard to be distracted from it. But we're not distracted from it. We're covering it. We're going to tell you the latest on whether or not Joe Biden will be impeached. And will he even know? Could you just put him in a desk that looks like the Oval Office? And would he even know he wasn't the president anymore? He probably wouldn't. But first, we're going to tell you about our friends over at Shopify. Because when you hear that sound of that cha-ching, that's the sound of a sale that you're missing out on. because you're not selling on Shopify. And what does it sound like on Shopify? It sounds like constant cha-chings. That's much better. So you should start selling with Shopify today. Shopify is the commerce platform revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're a garage entrepreneur or IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool you'll need to start to run and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. So whether you're selling satin sheets from Shopify's in-person point of sale system or offering organic olive oil on Shopify's all-in-one e-commerce platform, you're covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help them turn browsers into buyers. We do use Shopify for our Redacted store. If you're interested in seeing what kind of merch we've got there, we really enjoy using Shopify. And we love it when we see Redacted merchandise out in the wild. If you guys send that to us, we really love it. So right now you can sign up for $1 per month. That's a trial period at shopify.com/redacted, all lowercase. Again, go to shopify.com/redacted to take your business to the next level today. One more time, please do visit shopify.com/redacted. China recently passed the Foreign Relations Law, which lays out foreign policy with an aim to multipolarity. That means that no foreign policy must yield to a foreign power or aim to exert power. The West is freaking out about this in Western press. They're calling it anti-business. They're saying that it could even lead to military conflict. Here to discuss it is podcaster Carl Zha. He's the host of the Silk and Steel podcast that focuses on China, history, culture, and politics. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Melanie. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, of course. So at a high level, can you explain the foreign relations law and why the West is finding it so upsetting?
Okay, so all the news outlets reporting this as somehow Xi Jinping further consolidate his grip on power, which is ridiculous because Xi Jinping doesn't need to consolidate his power anymore. That was done when during the last party Congress when he was confirmed for presidency for the next 5 years. Now, what the foreign relation law is designed to do, according to the Chinese officials themselves, is to counter some of the U.S. sanctions that has recently been levied against China, particularly in the high-tech sectors. As we know, starting from Trump administration, but continue under Biden administration, now there's U.S. is waging a chip war against China. There's restriction on advanced semiconductor export to China, not just U.S. company, but companies worldwide. So companies in South Korea, Taiwan, and Netherlands are prohibited under U.S. law from exporting advanced semiconductors to China. So this is a global ban. It's not just U.S. companies. So basically, any companies that have any kind of business with United States, essentially any companies that deals with U.S. dollars will have to comply with the U.S. sanctions. And I'm sure people have heard just recently, China rolled out a counter sanction. Now China is placing restriction on rare earth elements that's exported to make the advanced semiconductor chips. So,
which the West doesn't have.
So the West do have the rare earth mineral resources, but they chose not to develop them. So in the last 20 years,
or if they are developing them, they're being litigated by environmentalists, so they can't. So they have no options. You're right.
Exactly. So you will take. If the West chose to, they can bring the rare earth mine back online, but that will take like 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
That's just how long it will take to bring a mine back up online. And meanwhile, China still controls somewhere between 90% of the rare earth production. So basically, China is saying, look, you don't want to. You want to restrict advanced semiconductor chips to me, then sorry, I'm going to cut off the minerals that you use to make those chips. And so this is just a further escalation. Now, the foreign relation laws that China rolled out is basically enable China to do exactly that, is to counter the kind of economic lawfare that United States have been waging on China for the past 5-6 years. That's what it's designed to do. And what some other thing that it's designed to do is codify some of the principles of the Chinese foreign policy. For example, the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which has been the cornerstone of the Chinese foreign policy since 1953, when it was first proposed by then Premier Zhou Enlai. And the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence are mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, mutual non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefits, and peaceful coexistence. So now it's been codified into law. And if people actually read what each article says under the new Chinese foreign policy law that's been rolled out, it says respect the UN Charter.
Right.
Respect the UN Charter. So I mean, like, I don't know how they can spin this as somehow like, just Xi Jinping consolidating power. It's just ridiculous.
Well, the way that CNBC has spun it is that this is anti-business, and businesses are worried they'll be forced to hand over data or can't work internationally. I don't completely understand that argument. Do you?
So this is basically okay. So right now there is a global-wide concern about data security. I mean,
Yes.
United States, each country is requiring the data these global companies collect on their citizens to be stored on servers inside their country. U.S. does it, China does it, everyone do it. Well, the so-called concern that they have to force to hand over data is kind of facetious. This is what every sovereign government is requiring right now. Both Europe, U.S., and China, and China do have a policy requiring multinationals who do business in China to do some kind of tech transfer. This has been the biggest complaint by the Western multinationals. But again, this is China exerting its exercising sovereignty, right? If you want to come into China, do business, you want to access the vast Chinese market or the Chinese labor force, you need to comply to the Chinese laws, which says you need to do tech transfer so these skills can be transferred to local forces, the local Chinese people will be trained, and the Chinese industry can climb that tech tree. This is what U.S. government is against. This is behind the U.S. This is logic of U.S. sanction. U.S. sanction, it says it's okay. China can assemble our iPhones for us, but they're not allowed to advance the tech tree. They're not allowed to, gain. They're not allowed to gain advancement in advanced semiconductors that threaten our hegemony in the tech space. That's basically what the whole U.S. Tech war against China is all about.
So it seems that this is a response to U.S. policy, and U.S. policy, they don't like it. And then just a day before this law went into effect, on June 30th, the U.S. issued State Department issued a warning to Americans not to travel to China. Do you think those two things are related?
Possibly. I mean, U.S. State Department issue outrageous warning all the time. They also issue a travel warning on Russia. It warns U.S. citizens not to travel on Russia. But actually, we're not. U.S. passport holder is not banned from travel to Russia. They just tell you not to do it. As long as you can get a Russia visa from the Russian consulate, you can travel. I just came back from Moscow, so as a U.S. passport holder, so there's no problem. And same to China.
It's more of a warning, like, we're not going to help you if you get in trouble, and there's a lot of trouble there. Yeah. We're just letting you know.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I would travel to China in a heartbeat if opportunity comes up. I don't think there's any danger for any ordinary Americans. If you're not in the employee of intelligence services, you shouldn't have to worry.
Now, one of the things in this law stipulates that China will be a leader in environmental and climate governance. That's something the West has been saying they want from China all along, that China won't cooperate when it comes to the environment. They're saying this. So maybe the West doesn't mean it when they ask for climate policy out of China. What do you think of that?
Well, this is weird because China has been the leading builder of the alternative power source. You know, if you look at any matrix, solar power, wind power, hydroelectric, China is way ahead of any country in the West. You know, but people then point out, well, oh wait, but China is expanding out its coal power plant. Of course, you know, right now the alternative power source right now, they are not stable. They're intermittent, so they require backup. You need, as China roll out this green energy source, they need to expand their coal power plant capacity as backup. So if people look at the actual power that's been generated by sustainable energy source in China, it's way outstrip, you know, what's been produced elsewhere in US or Europe. I mean, there's no question about that.
Yes. And Germany, the United States, they've all had carbon emissions peaks. They were allowed to do that and then stable out. The idea that China should not be allowed to do that is extremely short-sighted. One of the things that you posted about the foreign relations law I was interested in was by a former Pentagon official, Elbridge Colby, saying that this is going to lead to military action, the foreign relations law. This is only diplomatic policy, but he's saying, no, this is going to lead to war. Can you respond to that? Does this make for good fodder for a war for China?
Yeah, I mean, Albridge actually made a specific reference to 1941. You know, for people who don't know, that's the start of the Pacific War. What he's referring to is a time when U.S. applied trade embargo against the Empire of Japan. And at that time, the Imperial Japanese Army depended on oil and steel that's imported from U.S. or European colonies. And when the U.S. embargo was placed on Japan, some historians argue that forced Japan to do Pearl Harbor. And what Albridge is saying, he's saying right now, you know, we are at a position, U.S. is in a position to put the economic pinch on China, to force them to do something foolish, and then we can basically, bring our boots down, do a replay of Pacific War 2.0. I mean, I think it's crazy, it's misguided, especially when both U.S. and China are nuclear powers. I mean, any kind of hot war could lead to a nuclear escalation. I mean, that's a very dangerous path to go down.
Yes, and I've been thinking a lot lately about how, as a Westerner, I've been warmed up for this war with Russia, with anti-Russian sentiment for years now. And now I feel like I am being warmed up for anti-Chinese sentiment, even though it's been ratcheting up for years. Just this week, presidential candidate Nikki Haley laid out a fierce anti-China policy in a speech saying that, their military is oppressive, it's a police state. This seems to be, again, the anti-China rhetoric, and she's taking it up to 11.
I warned about China's growing military power, its growing repression at home and aggression abroad, and its growing challenge to American interests and America itself. I specifically called out its military-civil fusion program, where the Chinese Communist Party exploits American companies to strengthen its military. I urged our leaders to, quote, think about China critically, creatively, and courageously. China's police state is more comprehensive. It has destroyed freedom in Hong Kong. It has deepened its genocide of the Uyghurs. It is threatening Taiwan daily. Its no limits alliance with Russia has cemented. And of course, there was COVID.
Can you comment on that before I let you go?
Sure. I mean, Nikki Haley basically running her entire presidential bid on the anti-China platform, and she's not alone actually. So is Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes.
But if you actually look at their poll numbers, they're in single digits. I mean, there's no hope in hell they will be elected the president of the United States, and yet they're banking on their entire bid on the anti-China rhetoric. So at the same time, I think it's because now anti-China rhetoric has been consensus among the U.S. elite. But at the same time, as much as the U.S. public has been propagandized to accept a hostile relationship with China, I think a lot of those kind of anti-China sentiment is only skin deep, because at the end of the day, average Americans still more concerned about the economy, their jobs, how to provide for their children. China, these warmongers try to convince people that China is somehow an existential threat to the United States. I don't think people are buying that.
Yeah. But, the thing is that it's subtle. It's subtle, and it comes at us. And then all of a sudden, when there is a war, we're all in. That's the kind of thing that scares me, is to be led into something without thinking about it. So I really appreciate your voice on this and explaining this. And I hope you come back on Redacted another time. It was a pleasure to talk to you for the first time.
I would love to. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, you can follow along Carl Za on Twitter for his excellent analysis. And I'm glad to have someone besides me who's willing to break through anti-China rhetoric and see what's actually going on there, because this chip business is interesting. The United States is saying, oh, well, we're going to really sanction the heck out of them. And then when it turns back around, we don't like how it feels. And so we have to spin it. So this is really interesting, and how it will affect global businesses, especially those who haven't caught up from the chip shortage. So we'll see how that goes. So thanks for your comments on that. We're going to talk next about this new bill that says the government can no longer censor social media. They can't communicate with them and tell them what they like and what they don't like. There's some, in this opinion, some really colorful language. I'm going to warn you in advance that I'm going to show you the F word. Officials from the government literally writing to Facebook when things get through that they don't like, when conversations are happening that they don't like, saying what the F is going on. They have been doing this. We knew this from the Twitter files. Facebook has not said boo about it because of how much... how far they're in the cookie jar. It's not just their hands, and they are fully shoved inside the cookie jar. And so we're going to talk about that, and I'm excited. We also are going to give you an update on the impeachment process for President Joe Biden, because it does seem to be slowly marching forward. The media does not love it in the same way they loved the Trump administration, but we believe in equal justice under the law, so we're going to take a look at it. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Indeed, because the thing about running your own business is that every single hire counts, and no hiring partner understands that like Indeed. Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. You can find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessment, and virtual interviews. And if you hate waiting, well, then Indeed's U.S. data shows that over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job description the moment they sponsor a job. And so Indeed is definitely the place to go if you are hiring. We are a family of entrepreneurs. My father is an entrepreneur, has a business. My mother-in-law runs a business. My sister runs a business. Clayton and I run a business. So whenever it's time to hire, this is where we start, is Indeed. They know that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. So visit Indeed.com/redacted. That is, yes, sorry, I just wanted to double check. Indeed.com/redacted to start hiring right now. Again, just go to Indeed.com/redacted. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing is not available for everyone. But if you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right, we're going to talk about this social media censoring bit. So here we go. This is going to be fun. I like this story. I like it a lot, but I'm going to take a little stretch first. How are you doing, boys? You guys okay? David was getting his carpet.
I'm doing great.
shampooed.
I'm excited. I love censorship, so I can't wait to get into this one.
Yeah.
Censorship is my favorite.
Yeah, no,
Me
they're here
too.
cleaning my carpet, so that's why I'll be muted out, because I just had to let them in. The dogs were going nuts, and now that you can hear the shampooer in the room over. So
Okay. Is it going to be like that Sally Field movie where you get shampooed into a corner and you can't get out?
Hopefully not. If so, then maybe I can just keep the show going for the rest of the day.
Until it's all dry.
Yeah. I'll just
All
take
right.
comments.
Very good. Very good. Well, hey, before we move on, I won't pretend that I want to show Clayton that I can do this on my own and that my numbers are just as good as his when he does the show by himself. I've been very proud about it because, you know how in a marriage, I was like telling him about, this with the kids. He was traveling with two of our children, like their health insurance cards. It's packed in here and he wasn't paying attention. And I was like, don't ask me when you get lost and you don't know what to do. And he was like, don't ask me when you're running the show and you don't know what plugs into where. So I'll be damned if I call him for a single thing this week. I won't ask him to turn on a camera, to turn on a light. I have Philip and David for that. So if you please hit that like and subscribe button and show him that I don't need his help for this. I am perfectly fine running solo. It is a whole lot easier when he's around. I will admit that. I miss his voice. It's a little bit harder. But I want to show him that I can do it. So if you don't mind, please hit the thumbs up, not the thumbs down. And I would very much appreciate it. So, but he'll be back in a week. The aliens will return him and he'll have stories to tell. He's on assignment on the moon. Someone said that this is a coup, that I've launched a coup. No, it is not. This was a pre-planned absence on his part. He is sowing his royal oats. Who knows what he's doing? Okay.
Wait, does that mean something different over there than it does here?
Sowing your royal oats.
Sowing.
No, it's from
Coming to America.
It's from Coming to America. Yeah. You got it. Good job. Yeah. So who knows what he's doing? Okay. Well, here we go. You okay? You took a big breath.
Yeah,
no?
I just accidentally had my microphone still on.
Okay.
It's good. Just carry on.
All right, here we go. In a major ruling out of federal court, a judge ruled that the government can no longer reach out to social media and tell them what to censor. Hooray. I don't think that means that our platform on YouTube will get any easier for us anytime soon, but it does mean that the government can no longer dictate what is said. I mean, in terms of what we get punished for on YouTube, I think those things will continue. But I do still think this is a big one because it shows just how much the government has been doing it to all of us. Kind of awesome, too, that the opinion was handed down on Independence Day because the government has been taking away independence on the internet. And now they are not supposed to. The mainstream media is absolutely freaking out about this, saying that this is an activist ruling. Watch this piece on CNN where they're just beside themselves about the very notion of free speech.
Yes, this is a Trump-appointed judge, but this judge was confirmed 98-0 by the Senate. Just reading the words in this injunction, a, quote, massive effort by the defendants to suppress speech based on content. Those are the judge's words, calling the present case, quote, arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in the United States history, Ellie.
Yeah. It's a dramatic decision by this judge. If you read through it, he's citing to literature and George Washington and Ben Franklin. Here's what really is astonishing to me. This is a conservative ideology that clearly comes through in this decision. It's a conservative political ideology, right? We saw some of the quotes questioning vaccines, questioning masks, conservative talking points. But the ruling itself is the opposite of judicial conservatism. This is one of the most aggressive, far-reaching rulings you'll ever see. What this judge is purporting to do is to micromanage, really, the day-to-day interactions between essentially the entire executive branch, all these agencies that are listed as defendants, and the leading social media companies. And in the actual temporary injunction, the judge basically says, you're not allowed, administration, to talk to these social media companies about any protected free speech except for cybersecurity threats, national security threats, criminal threats. But where's the line? Who's going to police this? This is a judge trying to micromanage the day-to-day regular activities of the entire executive branch. I don't know that it's actually policeable by the judge, but it's really an astonishing. I don't mean this necessarily as a criticism. This is a very activist judicial opinion.
It's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen, and that's saying something.
It's now considered activism to go with the Constitution.
Yeah. To say that a judge can't rule in favor of free speech, that's activism. So therefore, free speech is bad, except whatever BS just came out of that person's mouth. I mean, they all looked literally beside themselves, that they're like, that the judge had actually said this is one of the most major attacks on free speech in the nation's history. And they're like, oh, what? How can he say that? Yeah, it's true. You must not have read the Twitter files out of willful refusal to do so, because we read the Twitter files and we saw that the government had been doing that, even censoring things that were true that they thought might lead to vaccine hesitancy, meaning they do not think anyone can think for themselves. And they just need to listen to what CNN tells them. The idea of micromanaging, I would like to put a pin in that because it's hilarious. I'm going to say that they probably didn't read the judge's opinion because it is full of proof of the federal government micromanaging social media. The case, the opinion, it has a lot of proof in it. It's 155 pages. And it's very heavy on Facebook, which is interesting because Twitter has come out and said, yeah, we've been doing this. Here are the Twitter files where journalists have showed us how much the federal government has been enacting censorship inside of Twitter. Facebook hasn't admitted to that. YouTube hasn't admitted to that. Pinterest hasn't admitted to that, even though we saw that they were copied on those emails from the government in the Twitter files. I want to go through the case just a little bit. Go ahead.
So if I can real quick, though, when we covered the Twitter files, I remember pointing out at that time, I was like, how is this not a First Amendment, like a total First Amendment breach? How can the government be involved in getting these companies to stifle free speech? And I was like, it just blew my mind at the time. Yeah. And so it's taken a few months, but finally somebody's come around to going, yeah, this is actually unconstitutional and the government needs to knock it off.
And there was no litigation around the Twitter files as far as I know right now. Where this comes from is a case that has been going on since the middle of the pandemic from the two attorneys generals I think it's attorneys general from Louisiana and Missouri, in which they accused the federal government of censoring important information about the COVID pandemic. We've talked about this case a lot. This is the case where Fauci was deposed and said he doesn't even use Twitter. This is the case where Jen Psaki was supposed to be deposed, and she said she couldn't do it because she had an MSNBC show and two kids. So this is the case that's been rolling on for a long time. But you're right, the Twitter files showed us that these unconstitutional things were happening, and we didn't get litigation around it. This case has not been decided. This is not the final ruling. It's just an injunction saying this case is proven enough that this is happening and it absolutely needs to stop while we finish the case. What he ruled is that the government, including the Department of Health and Human Services and the FBI, cannot talk to social media companies for the purpose of urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing in any manner the removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech. The judge in the case is Terry Doughty. It's the same judge who blocked the Biden administration's COVID vaccine mandate for all healthcare workers in 2021. And at the time, that only applied to 10 states. He starts out with this ruling when he quotes Friends of Voltaire from Evelyn Beatrice Hill saying, I may disapprove of what you say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it. Yes, you have my vote already with this, because this is the essence of what we are debating. And that, you can see now people are wearing their school colors for what side they're on. Free speech, yes, or free speech, no. It literally is an absolutist argument at this point. What the left's argument hinges on is you can't let people say certain things because of consequences. And so they think that you cannot handle the consequences and you must be policed and babysat. But that is not what the Constitution says. We have all collectively agreed that our value is free speech until it's not. And while we fight it out, it still is. The judge said that the present case arguably involves the most massive attack against free speech in U.S. history, just like CNN just told us. I agree with him. They find it dumbfounding. Here are the things that these two AGs in their complaints say that has been suppressed by the Biden administration. I'm just going to put it up on the screen because there are things here that I still cannot say because of the rules on YouTube. Particularly, I'm just going to tell you that I can't address number one, right, guys? I can't talk about that.
You can now. The election?
Yeah. Well, specifically
yes,
one.
You can now.
Okay.
You can now. Yeah, they reversed that one.
Okay.
But
number 1 and number 5 are things specifically that year's election were forbidden on YouTube. So you can read for yourself these things that, were suppressed. COVID origins, efficacy of masks and lockdowns, efficacy of vaccines, security of voting by mail. All of these things have been shown to, this is what the plaintiffs are alleging that were censored and then are further shown in this opinion and have been shown in the original complaint. Now, they are alleging it, but we saw it already on the Twitter files. You can just rewind the tape. I won't take you all the way. I considered today pulling all that stuff out. I don't feel like I need to if you went through the Twitter files. We saw it. They have been having regular meetings and direct line of communications between social media. Twitter is the only one that admitted this, but we know it happened at Google, Facebook, Pinterest, Microsoft. The case that the federal government has been threatening, the case alleges, sorry. So here's a major, I want to frame this differently. Why would social media go along with this? Not just because they're kind of all, ideologues, but because, as the case alleges, is that the federal government has been threatening social media companies that if you don't comply with our censorship, you will lose your liability protections. Here is how that is put, saying that the plaintiffs say that since 2018, federal officials, including defendants, have made public statements and demands to social media platforms in an effort to induce them to censor disfavored speech and speakers. Beyond that, plaintiffs argue that defendants have threatened adverse consequences to social media companies, such as reform of Section 230 immunity under the Communications Decency Act. Now, it goes on to say that plaintiffs also note that Mark, and then it cuts off because it's a different page, so it's hard for me to show you. But what it says there is that Mark Zuckerberg has said that this threat of antitrust enforcement is an existential threat to his platform. So they're afraid that the government will make their lives so much harder that it will put them out of business, that they do what the government says, which is coercion. The opinion, again, is very heavy on Facebook. And at some point, now I want to revisit this idea of like this CNN dude is really worried about the federal government being micromanaged by these rules. Like, when they have to comply with rules, that's micromanagement. That's basically the definition of bureaucracy. But like when there are rules, they're micromanaged. Here is one email from someone who worked from the federal government to Facebook when they had already been given explicit instructions about what to take off Facebook or what to downrank or what to, shadow ban. And when they didn't comply in the way that the government wanted, look at the email that they got in July 15th, 2021. Are you guys effing serious? I want an answer on what happened here today, and I want it today. Like, they felt that comfortable micromanaging. Who's micromanaging now? Not only telling them what to censor, telling them when to censor, telling them who to censor, telling them how much visibility could be there, but also, like, if it didn't go their way, this is your government telling them, are you effing serious? You answer to me what happened here. It also, mentions all the usual players who've been silenced or downranked or shadow banned: RFK Jr., Tucker Carlson, Alex Berenson, same players we've been talking about on this show. The Virility Project at Stanford, White House players like Jen Psaki is heavily involved in this case. We have to remember that, again, the judge has not ruled on this, but the judge is saying that these attorneys general had made their case and they are likely to succeed. Here is his opinion, his ruling on the likeliness of them to succeed, saying that they are likely to succeed on the merits of their First Amendment claim, that all of these government agencies have been doing this bad stuff. In a ruling on a motion for preliminary injunction, it's not necessary that the applicant demonstrate an absolute right to relief. Basically, like, we're almost there. They've done it. The injunction should take place now because free speech should be happening now. The government's argument against their likeliness to succeed is a little bit scary. What they said was that a ruling like this would restrict the government's right to government speech. They have a right to government speech, and it would transform government speech into government action. Ooh. Does that scare you a little bit? That instead of restricting your speech, they'll restrict your action. So you can't talk about not wanting a vaccine. Instead, they'll just come in and give it to you? Like, yeah, that's a little bit of an extreme interpretation here. But, like, what does government action mean? Like, if we can't do speech control, then we're going to be doing action control. Does that get anybody's spidey sense up like it does mine? Anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I'm like thinking it through, so sorry.
Yeah. I just don't like how that threat comes across. Like, you've got to let us police speech or else.
Yeah, I mean, because like I'm trying to figure out like what they mean, like government speech into government action. Like, what does that mean?
Well, let's play it out. Let's play it out. They didn't want you to say things on social media about certain elections. And so if you were saying those things and they can't stop you, they arrest you? Or...
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's like... And also it's like... Government speech, like... Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's like you have they're saying that if you do these things, then it forces government action, which means... Now that you've said these things online, the government has to take action to go and talk to these social media companies. They have to spend money to, litigate this stuff if they need to get it offline. They need to, pay to have these platforms create a backdoor so they can get in and start policing it. So it's like they are saying, like, because you didn't keep your mouth shut about this stuff, we had to take these actions in order to use your money and create these things that we can now use to police your speech.
All right. I mean, that would be less scary than action against people who are saying speech they don't like.
Yeah, but the problem is what this decision is saying, though, is that the government can't force social media companies to censor other people. It doesn't say the government can't speak. So that's what I don't understand, like where they're getting the idea that like taking away their ability to influence what other people say is infringing on the government speech. Like it's not. They can say whatever they want still. They just can't tell other people they can't.
Right. Yeah. Well, the judge didn't buy that argument. So that was him. That was in their argument against likeliness to succeed. And so, but I'm concerned that they think that because they can't police speech, then they'll have to move into heavier-handed action. And I don't like that. Now, will they stop communicating with social media companies now? Will they, or maybe social media companies who are feeling this pressure of working with the government will say, we really can't anymore. We can't be working with you anymore. We're going to have to make our own decisions, So no more fun lunches.
Yeah, but it's
no
like
more.
Snowden pointed out that they were taking all of our information, the NSA and all this other stuff. Do you think they really stopped? No, they expanded. So it's like they'll secretly be like, oh yeah, nope, you caught us. We can't do that. But then it's going to be even just more secretive, and we'll just never know.
I mean, yeah, I would like to envision these Slack channels just being closed, like door closed, gone, right? There were backdoor portals to Facebook that you needed a .gov email address, and then you could go in and tell them what you wanted to happen. All of those things should no longer exist, should have never existed, in my opinion. Will they still exist, or will they happen in a more in a way that can't be traced? I don't know. Who knows? I mean, the one legitimate point that was made on that ridiculous asinine CNN clip is, how will this be policed now? Who knows? But it should be that we can now encourage conversations where we have more curiosity about things that we were just not allowed to say. So let's celebrate the spirit of that, even if we don't know if we'll really see it in action. How about that?
Okay, deal.
Okay.
Sounds good.
You guys are not, you don't really believe.
We're not used to getting called on. We're used to interrupting. We usually just like chime in when we've got something to say. So we're not used to being called on. And I'm like, I don't know.
I'm going to move you to the front of the room. Like, you can't sit in the back
I have a problem,
while I'm running solo.
I have a problem giving anything our government does the benefit of the doubt. I just can't do it, because we've seen the things happen so many times, and nobody ever pays for anything. Nobody ever, they just keep kicking the can down the road, and nothing ever happens. So it's just like, you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on, you can't be fooled again. That thing.
Yeah.
Like, we just keep getting fooled, and I'm just not fooled anymore.
All right. Okay. Well, but it is fun to sort of watch people who love censorship freak out about this. So at the very least, we'll take that one. Okay. Well, we're going to talk quickly about the Biden impeachment proceedings that are moving forward, because there are still people who are interested in rooting out corruption. It does still seem to be partisan, but we're going to not take it from a partisan way. We're just going to see, is there something there that is disfavoring the American public because favors being sold for personal profit? That does seem to be true. But will we ever get any justice for it? Who knows? But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because if you are an investor looking for an easier way to trade stocks, maybe you would like 16 free stocks. Well, with Moomoo, our favorite trading platform, there's no steep learning curve. It has a simple interface, is easy to use, so even beginners can take advantage of the stock market in no time. Plus, it offers powerful tools, often reserved for experienced investors, like customizable watch lists and advanced charting capabilities. And now Moomoo even added a powerful new earnings calendar, so you don't have to hunt and peck trying to find the earnings schedule for your favorite companies. Right now, for a limited time, Moomoo is giving away 16 free stocks when you open your account and make your initial deposits until July 16th. Even if you never do anything else with the account, you get to keep those free stocks. Again, this offer is only good through July 16th. Moomoo has zero commission trades, and the app looks amazing on every platform, from iOS to Android to Windows and Mac. Moomoo can help you trade with its advanced tools like their stock screener and earnings calendar. So no matter what skill level is, you're going to find fantastic tools that help you trade. Open your free Moomoo account today. Get access to zero commission trades plus those 16 free stocks when you open your account and make those initial deposits. So to learn more, check out our link at redacted.inc/Moomoo. Once again, that's redacted.inc/Moomoo. All right, here we go. I would like to talk about the impeachment proceedings around President Joe Biden, because for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like we all were a little bit distracted when this really hit a crescendo, because it was a weird news week with the Titan sub and, the war in Ukraine and all of that. And I feel like those distractions are on purpose. I can't prove it. I have not done a content analysis, but I do very much feel Like, this is something we are not supposed to be paying attention to. And I also feel like it's something that we should. Look at this headline today from the Wall Street Journal. Is it even possible? Where are Republican probes headed? And is impeachment possible? So, okay, they're presenting this to you as a partisan thing, not at all that maybe the Biden family has been selling political favors that do not benefit the American people and only benefit the Bidens. No, not with that headline. It's just, are Republicans doing partisan things that are called impeachment? Let's look at the difference when Trump was under impeachment. This was from, what is this dated? I can't see it now. Can you see it? It's not loading for me. 2021.
It says January 11th, 2021.
Yeah, it's the House that moved to impeach Trump, not Democrats. It was the House that was presented as Congress, as something that was being done on behalf of us by our elected leaders. Recall that President Trump was impeached for January 6th, and he was impeached for asking Ukrainian President Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden's financial ties to Ukraine, which now is the crux of this impeachment. So there was something there that President Trump was looking after. Now, we were told at the time that was considered a political favor because Joe Biden was set to be his rival, and that was asking Ukraine for a political favor for his upcoming campaign. But we now know that the Bidens do have financial conflict in Ukraine and China and other places. The House Ways and Means Committee showed that Ukrainian energy company Burisma offered at least $5 million worth of bribes to the Bidens. Just a few weeks ago, James Comer said that these bribes are not just $5 million, that they may even get as high as $30 million in illegal bribes to the Biden family. And they've been asking and seeing financial records showing as such. Watch him say this to Maria Bartiromo just a few weeks ago.
If this is all true about a sitting president when he was vice president, influence peddling, accepting money from foreign nationals so that he could turn around and make changes in policy for America so he could pocket the money, if that's true, why isn't he impeached already? And if it's true that the FBI is doing nothing about it, why isn't Christopher Wray on his heels as well?
Those are great questions I ask every day. Look, Christopher Wray has no control over the FBI. One thing that I've learned from dealing with Grassley's whistleblowers is that this is an organization in disarray. No one has confidence in leadership at the top. You have bureaucrats, deep state bureaucrats, who are running the show. They're partisan. They want to get Donald Trump. They don't care what Joe Biden does because Joe Biden can be controlled. So we have issues with the FBI, but my investigation is about following the money. We're going to continue to follow the money. And Maria, I can assure you there's more money that we're going to be able to identify that was transferred between foreign nationals in other countries and the Biden family. This is going to be hard for Joe Biden to explain, and it's not going to go away. This is going to be an issue, and I think eventually the mainstream media will turn on Joe Biden and start asking the real questions. What did your family do to receive all this money?
What number are you up to now? How much have you identified of the money he's taken in from foreign nationals?
We have more bank records coming in, but we're going to exceed 10 million this week, and I think we'll get up between 20 and 30 million dollars.
Okay.
All right. Where do they get those bank records? From the FBI. They asked them for it. The FBI has had it all along. They've been able to, they continue these investigations despite the fact that Hunter Biden just got kind of a sweetheart deal around tax, a tax indictment. So here's a question that nobody seems to be willing to ask. You know, that first impeachment we went through recently around President Trump and his asking about an investigation in Ukraine. And now we have an investigation. Specifically an investigation of Joe Biden in Ukraine. Now we have that. We are shown that there was something there. Will we circle back to that first impeachment on Donald Trump? Or do we still say that that was a political favor? I'm not leading the question. I'm not leading the answer here. I don't have an opinion whether or not that was a political favor. Well, I do, but I haven't thought it through for the purposes of this segment, and I don't want to go there. But those two things are related, right? So it's interesting because the media, which loves Trump impeachments, doesn't want anything to do with this, even though they are related. They are pretending that it is not happening. Now, again, I think that we were all diverted from paying attention to this during the week of the Titan submarine search. And I admit I was just as riveted by that as everybody else. But the possible impeachable offenses pertaining to the president's financial ties to foreign actors, previously denied by the Biden campaign and continuously denied by the White House, when we're just told, well, there's proof there, but nothing's changed. But we have this proof now. Can you comment? No, because nothing's changed. That's what we get out of Karine Jean-Pierre. Several IRS whistleblowers have also shown these incriminating bank records when they have been testifying recently. And they showed this text exchange between Hunter Biden and a Chinese business one. One of them, again, showed Hunter Biden. Someone typed it out nicely in this text exchange. And then someone on Twitter was like, this is not what messages look like on WhatsApp, because someone just typed it out. This was brought in a briefing, a legal briefing by IRS whistleblowers. They didn't actually print out WhatsApp. But you can see what they said here. I'm sitting here with my father, and we'd like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. Tell the director that I'd like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand, and now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or a text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows, and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Now, since the president's lawyers have said he actually wasn't sitting there with his sons, okay. I guess we probably can prove that with a timestamp on the message and where the president was at the time. Maybe we can prove that. Maybe we can't. That means that they're saying his son was lying and was using the idea of his father the way Draco Malfoy does at Hogwarts. Harry Potter joke, if you like that one. So the president and his family have retained a lawyer now to go through all of this, which means there is something to go through. Again, recall during the Trump impeachments, we were told that Trump could not testify because he speaks in so many loops. He was so likely to incriminate himself. He refuses to sort of study up on legalese. They were just like, no, that's too dangerous. Well, could Biden testify, or would this certainly not be possible? I mean, he cannot get through. I think we can all agree he barely knows that he's on planet Earth. So he's not going to be able to sit for a test of for any kind of deposition or testify at all. So I do think we should watch this. It does seem very much that political favors have been sold, which means they are selling out the American people, saying these decisions will be made for money, not for what's best for everybody. We should watch this not as a partisan move, but as an actual attempt to root out corruption from both sides. Any response to this, David or Philip?
Nope.
You don't have to. Okay. All right. Yeah. No is an acceptable term. I wasn't really watching the chat. Do you any kind of sentiment about this that you guys can get a sense of? No. Okay.
Oh, I can't see the chat where I'm at. David might be able to, but it's too far away from me. I can see that it's going, but I can't read it from here. It's on my other computer.
Okay. So I'm striking out here. I'm on my own. Well, that's all I have to say about it. I would love to know what you have to say about it. If you think there is even such a notion as equal justice under the law, or if this will just be swept under the rug, like, oh, that's what Republicans are doing. And, I mean, we got a lot of press under the Trump impeachments. It made the media a lot of money. They really loved it. They don't seem to want to touch this one. And they can make just as much money. Like, I don't know. You could be self-serving about it, and you also could just be fair and cover it. And they don't seem to want to. But we took that on, and we're done with that for now. So I'm sure we will circle back around. So that does it for me for tonight. Remember, I won't be here tomorrow. I will be traveling. I am going to visit Clayton on the moon, or wherever he is. And then I will be back again doing the show over the course of the next week all by myself one more time. And it probably will be a little easier for me because my 6-year-old will be in a camp. So Yeah, it's a little bit harder. It's definitely a little bit harder when you don't have the siblings to play with her, because I have 3. And so having one is harder because the 3 always can do something together. And so when I'm her playmate and she walks in,
you or
like,
Grover.
Yeah. And like, she's like, here's Rapunzel, you're Flynn Rider, you know, like you got to do it. And so, and I am one of those moms who just, I use the screen as a last resort. And so I let her watch a couple of Disney Plus shows today because I was like, okay, I got to work. I got to concentrate on this. But I really try not to use the iPad babysitter if I can avoid it. So anyhow, I'm just telling you, I'm just telling you about my work day because I'm here. If you want to tell me about yours, you're free to in the comments. You didn't ask, but you're here. So again, I will not see you tomorrow. There won't be a newsletter, but I will see you tomorrow. Oh, but we never even told you to subscribe to the newsletter. I don't think we did that yesterday either. I forgot because I don't have Clayton cracking the whip on me. He keeps the trains on time a little bit better. He keeps me from going rogue. Yeah, I talked to him this morning and he was like, oh my God, what did you do yesterday? Like the story about the breast milk in Israel, like you're going crazy. So yeah, when the cat's away. But let me just tell you about the newsletter before we go, because again, it is a free subscription. You can go to redacted.inc, put in your email address, and it is a free newsletter that comes every day. It covers the same geopolitical topics that we talk about here on this show. A lot of times it has the original links to the things that we're going to talk about here. So if you don't believe me, you have proof. You can read for yourself. And we really appreciate your subscription and also your like and subscribing to this video and telling your friends about it. So again, you have just one more week of shows with one host, and then we will be back to 2, and the show will be better for it. But I appreciate you sticking with me. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great night. And